You make a point as almost the very last thing you say in the book, which I wanted to ask you about because I think it may relate to this. President's named as individual one. You went to prison for those felonies. He's clearly the person who directed the commission of those felonies. But you say at the very end of the book that the president and Attorney General William Barr ousted the U.S. attorney in the Southern District of New York and tried to install effectively the president's golfing buddy as the new U.S. attorney there because the president, in your view, wanted to arrange for himself to be indicted while he's still in office, because that would give him the opportunity to pardon himself after he lost the election. I just wanted to make sure that I understand the point that you're making there. Just ask you to elaborate on that a little bit, because I'm not sure I understand.
My theory is that if he loses, there's still the time between the election and the time that the next president would take office. And during that time, my suspicion is that he will resign as president. He will allow Mike Pence to take over, and he will then go ahead and have Mike Pence pardon him. And it's a very, let's just say, it's a very Nixon type of event. And it was probably discussed between Roger Stone and President Trump at some point, that this is certainly one way to avoid any potential prison time.
I suppose if he was going to do something like that, he could arrange for the type of pardon that Nixon, in fact, got, where Nixon hadn't been charged with anything. It was a prospective pardon that he basically arranged from Ford so as to make sure that he'd never be indicted after he left office. I suppose that same sort of arrangement could apply there, even if he wasn't, in fact, charged.
Though we have to remember that it doesn't apply to state charges, nor does it apply to the charges that will be brought.
That was Michael Cohen in an interview on MSNBC with Rachel Maddow earlier tonight, basically saying, among other things, that if Donald Trump loses to Joe Biden in November, he's going to quit, he's going to resign, have Mike Pence briefly become president so that Pence can pardon him. And Rachel Maddow seemed really interested, really intrigued by the idea, either that he would want to be indicted on some of the charges on him that may be pending so that Pence can wipe those out with a pardon, or maybe he would get a Richard Nixon style pardon like Gerald Ford gave to him, where he would basically be pardoned for anything he had done as president, even something he had yet to be charged with. And I find myself really torn on this because I think Cohen, I don't think he's just lying here. I think he's giving his opinion as a lawyer and as someone close to Trump. But I still think there's a lot of issues with this from a variety of perspectives. One, the reality is that this would almost certainly end Mike Pence's career. That Mike Pence, who would lose this election as vice president, maybe hypothetically could go away for a few years, lick his wounds, come back, and run for some sort of office. He'll forever be connected to Donald Trump, but he's a relatively young man in the grand schemes of national politics and could still have a career in the Republican Party. And I wonder if doing this might endear him to Trump supporters, but could really hurt him in this, process of rebuilding a post-Trump Republican Party, if that's what indeed happens. He would be president for just a few weeks. Unlike Gerald Ford, it would be during the election interim, so it would be especially egregious. When Nixon stepped away, it wasn't like it was between November and January. He was still rightfully the president and had not been defeated at the ballot box, and so therefore, neither had Gerald Ford been defeated at the ballot box. And I wonder if Mike Pence would not do this, that it's a bridge too far, even if Pence is loyal to Trump. There's also the reality of jurisdiction. Certainly, the president can pardon people, and often for very serious things. And whether you agree or disagree with that, it's one of the powers the president has, and they can use it for good or they can use it for ill. But the case is that not all crimes, not all charges are within the pardon purview of a president, and that things that are local and state in jurisdiction aren't really pardonable by the president. And some of the things that Trump could be hypothetically indicted on, a Pence pardon could wipe away, could erode. Not all of the things that he and his family and the Trump organization are involved in are strictly federal. Some of the things being handled by the district attorneys in southern New York are indeed federal, but not all are. And so it's hypothetically the case that while Pence could wipe out anything related to his dealings abroad, because that's obviously federal, local and state charges could still apply against him. And so you wonder, would Trump bother to do this, and would Pence bother to help him if the end result is still him and those close to him facing serious charges down the line? And I think one other factor has to be Trump's narcissism. Look, the simple truth is that Donald Trump is a narcissist. He believes that he is above consequence in how he's treated women, how he's treated people he's done business deals with, how he's treated customers, students at Trump University. Every step of the way, Trump has shown he doesn't care about anybody but himself, and he especially doesn't care about those he deems lesser than him, those without the same level of social and economic and political power as him. And so here is a man who's been rewarded for that. He's gone bankrupt, I don't even know how many times. He's been awful to his family. He's been awful to his friends. He's been awful to his business partners. He's been awful to his colleagues. He's been awful to his customers. And he's president. He's a wealthy man, and he's president. If there is an example of a man who has failed upwards again and again and again, more than anybody else, it might be Donald Trump, at least of the people I can think of. And so here's a person who I guess could rightfully think in his own head, why do I need to be pardoned? What consequences have I ever faced? What consequences will I ever face? I'm above the law. I'm above consequence. And you have to think that if the election's close, and it might well be close, that Trump would rather ride it out and try to fight the result through legal means and otherwise, rather than give up and get a pardon. And this is all beyond the fact that the only other example we really have is Nixon, and the legality of the Gerald Ford pardon of Nixon was, not really tested. For instance, again, that decision to basically give Nixon a posthumous pardon, which is to say that even things that he had yet to be charged with that he did as president, he would be forgiven for. No one really went to court to ask if that was legal. And so it might be, but it might not be. And there's no precedent to make that determination. So I don't know about this. I want to know what you guys think. Do you think that the Trump pardon would even be effective? Do you think it would be legal? Do you think that Pence would sacrifice his career for it? And do you think that Trump would sacrifice his ego for it? Let me know in the comments. I'll read every single one.